Welcome to the Business Spotlight. I am joined here by our guest, Dr. Alan Barnard. He is the CEO of Goldratt Research Labs here in Las Vegas. Dr. Alan, thank you for being on this episode of the Business Spotlight. And I'll tell you a little bit about the Business Spotlight. Number one, it's going to go out to our personal network here in the Las Vegas Valley, also to the Action Coach Global Network. So we are excited to learn more about your business and what makes you guys special. So Dr. Alan Barnard, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and how long have you been doing it?
Sure. Firstly, thank you so much, Edgar, for the invitation. My name is Alan Barnard. I grew up in South Africa. I've always been very passionate and curious about decision making, why good people make and often repeat bad decisions. And like most entrepreneurs, I turn that curiosity and passion into a business. And that's what my research lab does, is we study why good people make and often repeat bad decisions, both in their personal lives, but also in their business. And from that research, we've developed a whole range of applications that help people make better, faster decisions when it really, really matters. We make 30,000 odd type of decisions every single day. It can be quite overwhelming to think about it, but the reality is that most of those don't matter. But there's a few that matter a lot, and those are the ones that we're very passionate about, is to help people make better, faster decisions when it really, really matters.
Yeah. So how did you discover with your business, right? And knowing that we make so many decisions per day and fine-tuning it to make great decisions?
I think, we all strive for focus. And one of the methodologies that I learned early on and that we use within our own company and with clients is a methodology called theory of constraints that was developed by my co-founder, Dr. Goldratt. That's where our research lab get the name from. And that really helps us to figure out which are those important decisions that matter a lot. So for example, if you've set yourself a really ambitious goal and you ask yourself, do I have enough customers that want the product or services that I provide to achieve that goal, whether my goal is a financial goal in terms of income or impact, and you say no, then probably that's the constraint in your business. That's the weakest link. You just don't have enough customers. So any decision around that helps you to better, utilize the customers that you have or to get more of them, that becomes really critical. All the other decisions that are dealing with links that are not currently the weakest link, those become much, much less important. So that's an area that I picked up earlier, is that to really focus on where's the constraint or the weakest link in your business and make sure you get those decisions really right.
Yeah. That's a lot of the coaching we do with a lot of the business owners that we work with. It's having that process, and is it streamlined? And then are those goals SMART goals, right? Are they achievable, or are they beyond being realistic? So very good that you guys focus on that side, because it is a lot of decision making, especially in entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, I think the other only thing to add to that is that, again, decisions can be quite overwhelming unless you think about them as options that you can exercise. There's always more than one option. Each of the options have got some unique pros and cons. And really what you want to do is to either select or create options that have a big upside if it works and a small downside if it doesn't. I call those hell yes options or hell yes decisions, right? Big upside if it works, small downside if it doesn't. And you want to stay the hell away from those that have a small upside if it works and a big downside if it doesn't. So just using that framework is often very useful, because we can't predict the likely outcome of any decision, positive or negative, but we have strong intuition about best case and worst case, and that's sometimes all that we need to make good decisions.
Yeah. It's good that you guys are helping with that, because I know it's needed, and we see it a lot in the coaching world. So part of the Business Spotlight, is to educate and inspire people who are thinking about opening a business or get into entrepreneurship. So with that being said, what would you say has been the biggest learning curve since you started your business with the industry?
I think it's the fallacy of Field of Dreams, that movie, build it and they will come, right? You build a product or service that you think can add a lot of value, and you just expect people to knock on your door and ask for it. And, we were originally very lucky. We had a lot of word of mouth, and that's what happened. And suddenly when the word of mouth stops and you left with no customers, suddenly you have to realize, wow, I actually need to think about who is my dream customer, who can get most value from the products or services that we provide. Where do I find them? And what is the offer that I could make them that would make it irresistible, that would address all the concerns that they might have to either not buy or not to use? So I think that has been the biggest learning curve, is understanding how absolutely vital marketing and sales is right from the moment that you start your business.
Yeah, that's very spot on. A lot of that has to be tested, measured, know who you're trying to attract, right? And then how do we get the messaging out? And do they want what we need? So that's very, very insightful. What would you say is the hardest part about being an entrepreneur or business owner?
I think probably the hardest part is the fact that regardless of what business you start, it's going to take an enormous amount of hard work. And that means that you're probably going to make some compromises. You're going to have to sacrifice some things. And I think that's part of the reason, we see that people are they often say, I have a fear of failure. But I think that probably in many cases, it's actually a fear of success. It's understanding the level of work that it would require to become successful. And it's kind of like going to the gym, you can't just go once, you have to go every single day. And it's lonely at times, you have to put up a brave face in front of your customers and your own team when things might be not going well, either in the business side, you might be having a cash constraint or struggling to solve some critical problem for a client, or you might be dealing with personal issues, and you still have to put that brave face. I think the best thing about entrepreneurship is that you can turn your passion into a business and do things that allow you to make a big impact and make a good enough income. And those are the type of things that make us feel like we have a full and meaningful life.
Yeah. I think in what you said, it's one of the analogies I like to use, right, is going to the gym, right? You can't just go one day and all of a sudden you are Mr. Olympia, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of it, not just going to the gym, but you have to work out different parts of the body, right? We got to work out our arms, our legs, we got to run, cardio. There's abs, back, chest, legs. Same thing with business, right? There's so many different levels and variables in business that most entrepreneurs or most business owners, right? They're very smart and very talented at what they do, but then there's all these aspects of business, and that's where we come in, right? And educate them and through business re-education to make them more successful. So glad that you guys are seeing that too. My question to tip off of that one is, what's your favorite part about being an entrepreneur?
As I mentioned, this is just the opportunity to turn what you're really passionate about, into a business, whether it's making products that people can really benefit from, or providing them with a service or coaching like you do. That's a part, I think unless you have that compelling vision, like for me, I wake up every day and my goal is, how can I help somebody make an impossible decision or achieve some kind of impossible goal? That is kind of what absolutely gets me up every single morning.
Yeah, that's that fire, right? How are you going to make an impact? How are you going to help somebody? Very, very similar in our world is how are we going to help that business owner today with our coaching session? Who would you say is the most influential person in your life, and how have they impacted you?
I've been privileged to have had incredible mentors. I'm privileged to have an incredible wife at the moment that inspires me every day. She's an amazing golfer. But the person that's probably made the biggest impact has been my co-founder, Dr. Goldratt, that created Theory of Constraints. I met him very early on in my life. And very shortly after I met him, he asked me what my life goal was. And I shared with him this whole list of milestones that I wanted to achieve, when you're 20 years old. And he said, no, it's clear that I don't have the same definition of a goal as he is. And I said, so what's your definition? And he said, it takes courage to have a dream. A life goal is taking your dreams seriously.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful, is to think every morning when you're waking up, do you still have that dream? And are you actually taking it seriously? Are you doing the things that are moving you closer to that? Are you surrounding yourself by people that can get you closer to that?
Yeah, yeah. Well said. I couldn't have said that better myself. When you set those goals and you have that vision of, hey, this is what I'm building to, this is where I want to go. What we found is not a lot of people have that up anywhere. So if they just have it in here and they don't have it down on paper on a vision board, how are they really going to achieve that, right? So it's taking those measures, and that's why we meet with our clients every so often and we do 90-day session plannings to be able to say, hey, are we on track? What adjustments do we need to make? And do we need to make any pivots? That does lead to my next question. What do you feel is the biggest mistake first-time entrepreneurs make?
I think it's conceptually, it's two things the same type, right? Trying to do too many things at the same time, launching too many products to too many markets. Pick that niche, pick that one product, just that one thing, that all that you need to know is there's enough people out there that want it, that could benefit from it, right? It doesn't matter how small that little dot is in this huge market. There's always many, many more customers that could benefit from it than what you have capacity for. But the very closely related to that is, as I mentioned earlier, is we tend to make the mistake where we are solving problems that are not yet problems. So now we're thinking about, oh, I need to build this huge website, or I need to build this new online coaching program, when you haven't actually done the check if there's enough people that want and need your product or service. That's the problem you need to solve first. Once you've solved that problem, okay, now think about what's the next thing,
Yep.
So I think just thinking through that framework is, start off with a very ambitious goal that inspires you. Then, do you have enough customers to meet that goal? Right. Do you have enough capacity to supply all those customers? Do you have enough supply? And then, do you have enough cash? Is to solve those things one by one, rather than trying to solve everything together, because then you're not solving anything.
Yeah. And I'll echo what you just said. Is we think about, or most business owners, right? They think about, I have to have the perfect website. I have to have this ironed out. The first thing you got to go do is go get your first client. Once you get your first client, rinse, repeat, recycle, everything else can be figured out. But the first thing you got to do is go get that first client, right? Yeah. And I know that's one of the problems that we've seen. So that's really good advice. I know a lot of people are going to get some value out of this. This will lead to my next question for you is, how has your business changed, or how does your business look different now versus when you first started it?
I think, when we first started, you have kind of a goal that you're trying to achieve, and as you move over time, that goal becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. And it enables you to have more and more and more focus. It's kind of like, if somebody says to me, what's the advice I would give to a 20-year-old? I know that's one of the questions that you often ask is just be patient. You don't need to decide right now. Is just try a bunch of stuff and see, how does it make you feel when you're doing that stuff? Are you actually bringing value to people? Do you get that feedback that you're contributing value? And is it enabling you to make the kind of impact and income that you want? And just try a bunch of things, be patient with yourself. And it's the same for business, right? It's going to be a struggle to verbalize very clearly and very simply your marketing message, but keep on trying. Like you said, go out there, get that client, but every time, treat it as an experiment. Try to learn what worked and what didn't. Every time you get a no, have the courage to phone them back and say, you know what? I thought you were my dream client, right? I thought that you would get a ton of value from what we offer. And yet you said no. Like, I'm devastated, but I'm curious, like, what happened? Like, was my assumption that you don't have this problem? Was that, or that you do have this problem? Was that wrong? Or was there something wrong with our pitch? And it's just constantly learning from experience. I call it learning from experiment.
Yeah, 100%. It's having the fortitude, even though you got the rejection, to ask, hey, what was it?
Yeah.
Right. And typically it's not a lot of outcomes. It's one, the message wasn't delivered correctly.
Yeah.
Two, they probably still have questions.
Yeah.
Or the third one is really simple. They just didn't like you. Right. And
So
and and
more trust.
sometimes it's almost never number three. Once in a blue moon it is, but
Yeah.
it's usually the first two, right? And if you
Right.
can solve those problems right then and there, then you'll get more yeses, right?
Yeah.
Now, as we're getting out of COVID, and along this journey, because you've been in this for about 15 plus years now. So, and I think you guys are approaching your 16 years. So
Yeah.
along this journey, what have you personally learned about yourself?
I think COVID is a great example of a crisis, right? And what we often do when we're in a crisis, whether that's a business crisis or a relationship crisis, right? Once you realize you're in a crisis, you realize you have to do something dramatically different to get out of the crisis.
Right.
But then what do we do when the crisis is over? We go back to the old way of doing it, right? So I think that's one of my biggest lessons, and maybe, something I can share with your listeners and viewers is when you get out of that crisis, think about what rules that you break and why shouldn't you use these new rules all the time, right? It's like a little business is suddenly in a crisis. They don't have enough capacity. And normally when a customer phones in and says, I need 100, you would say, fine, I'll give you 100, right? Whether they need only 10 or 20, you don't care. But when you have a capacity problem, you say, how much do you really, really need? And they go, actually, just 10 a week. You say, okay, I can supply you 10 a week. But then when the crisis is over, you go back to over producing and them over procuring, rather than why don't we always do that? Why is that not the rule? Only give them what they really need right now. So that to me has been kind of the biggest lesson learned is if we try, we can actually learn from experience, and crises are the best possible time to learn.
Oh yeah.
We call them a crisis because they shook up our world. It's like when you hit rock bottom, that's the best time to learn, right? Because it's a bloody wake-up call, right? It's through your decisions that you got here.
Right.
What were those decisions that I need to make sure I never make again in the future?
Yeah, when you hit rock bottom, it's like, what else do I have to lose? And there's only one way to go, and that's up, right? And I think you made a really good point, right? During COVID, it made a lot of people shift and pivot. And the interesting part is the people who adapted, they took not advantage, but they implemented strategies that made them thrive. Yet other industries where other owners, they were just waiting for it to get over, and there's, unfortunately, some of them lost their businesses. That's where, having us there to mentor and guide them and keeping them like, hey, what did your business look like then? What does it look like now? And what can we continue to improve on to make sure we're capturing on both ends, right? And staying ahead of it. Now, as business coaches, we do work with a lot of smart and talented people, that are very great at what they do. Like I was talking about earlier, right? We work with doctors, lawyers, architects, engineers who are, they're looking for ways to learn, grow, and expand. And at some stage of their business, when they start to hire and delegate and bring on the right talent, they're trying to figure out, where do I put this person to do the best job possible, right? And what we have learned is when we're doing and helping them along the business owner along this entrepreneurship journey, that there is no certification and there is no instructions when it comes to being a business owner. And that's where, as business coaches, we're there to help guide and mentor them to eliminate that day-to-day chaos, right? In that decision making, are we making the right decisions? So it's a great way for us to segue and wrap up today's meeting and today's business spotlight. As we wrap up, is there one question that you wish I did ask that I didn't ask that you do want to let the viewers know?
Well, it's you mentioned to me during the precursor that one of the important questions is sort of when all said and done, what do you want people to know most about you or to remember you by? There's a quote that have inspired me my whole life by a French physicist, Jean Baptiste Perrin. And he said that the aim of all science is to substitute visible complexity for invisible simplicity. You know, if you think about E equal to mc squared, it's massively simple, but it explains a lot of complexity. And in decision-making and goal achievement, there's a lot of complexity. And my aim have always been to find that one question, that inherent simplicity that can change anything, everything. And that discovery of mine was when somebody's facing a goal or decision that they think it's impossible, or you are facing a goal or decision that you think is impossible, just ask yourself, it's impossible unless, and let that just sit there for a while, because what it does, it actually disrupts the brain, that question. Right. It immediately will force you to think about the conditions that, if it existed, could make the impossible possible. So that's kind of, you know, the thing that I hope that people remember me by is whenever they hear themselves saying, or they hear somebody else is saying something is impossible, just ask yourself or ask them, it's impossible unless.
Right. Well, great way to end today. Dr. Alan Barnard, again, what's the best way for people to connect with you or get a hold of you if they're looking to, you know, to connect with you or are looking for your services?
Sure. My handle on all the social media channels is just Dr. Alan Barnard. So ALANBARNARD. I have a YouTube channel that people can subscribe to. Also have a website, dralanbarnard.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for taking the time out of your day to be on this episode of the Business Spotlight. And I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Edgar.